Welcome to the channel. Today we're sharing a cheating story you won't believe. If you enjoy it, please like and subscribe. Let's get started. Hey Brian, it's James. Is Olivia there? I didn't catch the sound of Brian hanging up because Sophia, my wife, was shouting and banging on the locked door of my home office. After a couple of minutes, I tried calling Brian and Olivia's number again. If you call again, I'm going to report you to the police. Understand? Brian warned. I get it, but I have something important to say. I don't care if you involve the police. I'm going to speak with your wife and you can't do anything to stop it. Have a good night. I hung up, feeling a bit of satisfaction. Despite the pounding on the door, I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and tried to make the last important decision of a long, stressful day. Should I call my brother-in-law's husband? I met my wife, Sophia, in high school. I was a senior, sitting in the bleachers with my buddies, waiting for the start of a Friday night football game. A group of girls from the junior class sat in front of us. As the game progressed, we took turns going to the concession stand. When it was my turn, a cute brunette named Sophia joined me. We carried hot dogs, fries, and sodas back, and Sophia and I ended up sitting together. She was smart, had a good sense of humor, and best of all, she didn't have a boyfriend. During the third quarter, someone shouted, "Are we going to Taco Bell after the game?" There was near unanimous agreement. I took a chance and asked Sophia, I would rather have pizza than greasy fries. Want to go to Robert's Pizzeria? She agreed and I was thrilled. Sophia and I dated once a week for a couple of months and seemed to enjoy each other's company. We committed to going steady after 2 months and things only got better. Sophia was my date to the senior prom, and I was walking on clouds as I escorted the most beautiful girl in our school to the dance. I was in heaven until I wasn't. 2 weeks later, on the Monday leading up to the prom, I was jogging to the tennis courts for practice with my neighbor, Jessica Ford. Jessica was on the girls' team. I was confused when Jessica said, "I think you're a really nice guy, James. We've known each other forever, Jessica." "Why tell me now?" I asked. She punched my shoulder as we ran and said, "It's great you're letting Sophia go to the prom with Daniel Baker. Otherwise, he'd never get the chance." Daniel was a shy, nerdy guy who lived near Sophia, and she always looked out for him. I wasn't surprised she agreed to go with him, but I was pissed she didn't tell me. By Friday afternoon, 6 people had complimented me on my maturity. They thought it was great my girlfriend could go to the prom with her friend. Truthfully, I didn't feel mature. I was angry Sophia didn't tell me. I knew she'd come clean on our usual Friday night date. She didn't have a choice. At the last minute, I texted her and canceled. I was bombarded with texts and voicemails, begging me to call her. After a dozen notifications, I finally texted back, "I've known about your prom date since Monday. At least 10 people told me. Too bad you weren't one of them. I want a girlfriend I can trust. That's not you." I turned off my phone and sulked. Sophia and I didn't get back together until the start of the next school year. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was heading to my car in the student parking lot. Sophia was sitting on the hood of my car. "Will you let an old girlfriend buy you an ice cream at Sweet Treats?" she asked. That was the start. We were exclusive for the next 2 years. During the second year, we had a long-distance relationship as I went to college in Boston. I came home often and was thrilled to exchange virginity on an August Saturday night, shortly after her 18th birthday. Sophia and I dated until she left for college the following year. 2 weeks into her freshman year, I received a Dear John email. She was having too much fun in college and didn't want to be tied down. I never called or wrote. I was popular, got good grades, and was a Division III tennis player. I replaced Sophia with a steady stream of girls starting the next night. I didn't see Sophia again until 2 years after she graduated. I was working as a staff engineer for a local tech company and was out with colleagues after a long week. I literally bumped into her at a bar. We talked for a few minutes before returning to our friends. I kept an eye on her for the next hour and couldn't decide if I should follow her to the parking lot when her group started to break up. I chuckled when Sophia's friends left, and she walked to the bar, sat on a stool, and ordered a drink. When she was served, she turned her chair until it faced me and stared at our table. I watched her with a smirk as a stream of guys approached her, only to be quickly rebuffed. It wasn't until she looked me directly in the eye and held up 2 fingers that I excused myself from my friends. "2?" I asked. Sophia smiled and said, "Yep. If you'd let 2 more guys ask me out, I would have accepted one." Sophia and I dated for almost 6 months before we became exclusive and moved in together. We were married 10 months later and lived a happy life for almost 6 years. My day started early. I had a 7:30 a.m. meeting with a longtime customer and friend at the downtown Marriott in Portland, Oregon, home of a well-known university. Michael was already sitting in the conference room I would reserved. We chatted while I set up my laptop, laid out paperwork, and filled a mug with hot coffee. Michael is a contractor assigned by his company to work on a Navy project. I'm a senior mechanical engineer for a defense contractor. We had successfully worked together on 3 small but important contracts over the last few years. For some reason, we were getting pushback from our superiors on our current negotiations. We were told we had one more chance to solve the 7 critical issues before others in our companies would take over. Michael and I worked straight through lunch and finally took a deep breath at 2:45 p.m. "Do you think your company will accept it this time?" I shrugged and said, "I can't understand why our last 2 proposals weren't accepted." Michael wondered, "Do you think it might be a test to see if we're too close?" I chuckled and admitted, I felt the same. Michael asked, "How about a drink?" I held up my notebook and said, "I've got over 25 pages of notes to figure out. A drink won't help. I'm going to hang out and transcribe the important resolutions into my laptop. I'll email you a memo by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Let's get on the phone immediately if there are any misunderstandings." "Sounds good," Michael said as he packed up. I walked Michael through the hotel lobby and stopped at the gift shop for a diet soda before returning to the conference room. As soon as I entered, I felt like the walls were closing in. I decided to change my location, packed my bag, and relocated to a quiet corner of the lobby. I checked in with the office and found some small problems had developed over the morning. I texted my wife and suggested she have dinner without me. Settling into a comfortable lobby chair, I got to work. The change in location helped, and I was able to plow through a great deal of work over the next few hours. I was so focused that I was surprised her laugh caught my attention. I looked up and recognized Olivia, my sister-in-law, walking across the lobby in a little black dress and heels. She was headed to the check-in area with a tall, good-looking man who wasn't her husband, Michael. Without thinking, I turned on the camera app on my phone and took several pictures of the couple as they checked in. One picture made me steam as the man's hand dropped and gave her but a squeeze. I took more pictures as they walked to the elevator and a final set as they entered and kissed as the doors closed. I quickly walked over and saw they got off on the 8th floor. I was angry and confused. I loved Olivia and counted her husband, Michael, as my best friend. I sat back in my seat, dazed. Between the day-long negotiations and the shock of seeing Olivia with another man, my brain was fried. I didn't notice the man sitting next to me until he reached out his hand. "Hi, I'm Ryan, the general manager of the Marriott." As we shook hands, I said, "Hi, I'm James Wilson. I rented conference room B22 today." Ryan nodded and asked, "I saw you taking pictures of the couple who just checked in. Do you know them?" After a moment, I answered, "I know the woman. Can I guess that you were surprised to see her with her gentleman friend?" "Very surprised," I told Ryan. "Mr. Wilson, may I be blunt?" After I nodded, he continued, "I'm worried there's going to be trouble if you stay here. I've never gotten into the kind of trouble you're talking about. There is likely to be a confrontation, but I'll walk away before disturbing your guests." Ryan looked around the lobby, which was fairly quiet. He handed me a folded sheet of paper. I unfolded it and found a man's name and address printed. Ryan asked, "Do you think there can be even less of a confrontation now that you have that information?" As we shook hands, I said, "Almost guaranteed." I went back to work and was able to complete a surprising amount. When Olivia and her guy exited the elevator nearly 3 hours later, I was on my feet and walking toward them. I held my cell phone to my face, snapping pictures as I approached. Olivia was confused at first, but when I lowered the camera, her jaw dropped, and she visibly turned pale. "I would give you a kiss like I normally do, but I don't want to taste your boyfriend on your lips," I said. "James, what the hell are you doing here?" "I'm here for meetings." "Why are you here?" Olivia willed herself to calm down. She took a moment and said, "James, I would like you to meet Ethan Carter. We work together. We're here to check out meeting rooms for an upcoming event our agency is hosting." Ethan stretched out his hand. "Nice to meet you, James." I ignored his hand and asked, "Ethan, is it? Can I ask you a question?" Ethan and Olivia exchanged strained looks before I asked, "Do you think Olivia is more attractive in those sexy, hip-hugging jeans, skin-tight blouse, and boots, or the hot black dress she wore to inspect meeting rooms 3 hours ago. Before they could respond, I looked down at Ethan's left hand. Nice wedding band, Ethan. I see you're as much of a lying, cheating pile of as my precious sister-in-law. At that point, Ethan lost his cool. Listen, jerk, you don't have a clue what's going on. Mind your own business, and I won't kick your butt. Sorry to tell you, Ethan, but my sister-in-law cheating with a worthless jerk like you is my business. They'll give you a free first shot. You better make it good, because after you take your shot, I'm gonna pound you into the ground, call the cops, and file charges against you. I shut up and smiled. Ethan jerked his head toward Olivia. Can you handle this jerk? I need to go. Without waiting for an answer, he stormed off toward the hotel's front door. If I were you, I would give your wife a heads up. They'll be calling, I said. Ethan stopped and turned, directing his gaze at Olivia. Please take care of this, he reiterated before leaving. Olivia put her hand on my arm. James, can we go into the bar and have a drink? I'm sorry, Olivia. I've wasted hours waiting for you to finish your fling. I need to get home, have a drink, and decide how to tell Michael and Ethan's wife. Olivia squeezed my arm and pleaded. I only do this when Michael's away. It doesn't mean anything. I'm not hurting Michael. How long have you known me? Olivia? She looked deep into my eyes. I guess at least a dozen years since I first dated Sophia in high school. Does that sound about right? After a pause, I told her, in all that time, what makes you think I won't tell my best friend his wife is a lying cheater? I turned to the exit and caught Ryan's gaze. He gave me a thankful nod as I pushed my way through the revolving door. The rush hour traffic was gone as I started the half-hour drive north on Route 88. I set the cruise control to 75 miles per hour and turned up the volume on the country music station. The only annoyance was the constant dings and rings on my phone. It seemed my wife was urgently trying to reach me. I pulled into our garage and closed the door behind me. After exiting the car, I heard Sophia yelling. Where the hell have you been? She demanded. I slid by her and walked into the kitchen, dumping my work gear on the countertop. I noticed Sophia's phone sitting on the table next to a half-full glass of wine. I picked it up, used the keypad to type in her password, and opened her text messages. I could see the text message I sent earlier had been read. You know where I've been. You read the message. That's not what I meant, and you know it, she snapped. Heading to the den to pour some bourbon, I said over my shoulder, then tell me what you mean. When I came back to the kitchen, Sophia was sitting at the table. What did you do to upset Olivia? She asked. As far as I know, I haven't done anything to upset Olivia. She, on the other hand, has upset me greatly. I watched Sophia gather her thoughts as I sat across from her. Did you know Olivia is cheating on Michael? It was only once, Sophia said. Well, that's a lie. Olivia told me she only cheats when Michael's on the road. Did you know your sister cheats on Michael? Sophia sighed, took a sip of wine, and said, This is between Michael and Olivia. That's the first thing you've said that I agree with. My problem is Michael doesn't know there's a problem that needs to be addressed. This is none of your business, Sophia exploded. I want you to keep your mouth shut. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. You know me, Sophia. You know me better than anyone. Sophia expected more and was startled when I got up and walked to the kitchen archway. I hesitated before turning. I've asked you twice if you've known about Olivia's cheating, and you've refused to answer. I'll ask again, how long have you known? You know Olivia. She's always been a bit wild, Sophia replied. That's not an answer. What the hell does that mean? It means you refuse to answer a question that's critically important to our marriage. What Olivia does when Michael's away doesn't have any bearing on our marriage, Sophia said confidently. Let's see. First, my relationship with your sister will never be the same now that I know she's a liar. Every holiday we celebrate with your family, you'll be reminded of her treachery. Second, you've given me every indication that you've known about her behavior, and I wonder if you approve. That's not fair, James. Third, I travel once a month for work. For the first time in our relationship, I have to wonder if you've cheated on me. Sophia's eyes grew huge. How dare you accuse me of cheating? I've never accused you of cheating, but your cavalier attitude toward your sister's affairs has me wondering if you have. I glared at Sophia. You and I both know you can't prove you haven't cheated. All I have is my trust in you, and right now, that trust is shaken. I turned and walked to my home office. After doing an internet search on Ethan Carter and confirming he was married, I decided to tackle the last awful chore. I texted my brother-in-law Michael. You're getting home on Friday, right? It took 10 minutes before he responded. Yes. I land at 2:30 p.m. Meet me at Harry's Tavern. They'll be there at 4. Does this have anything to do with Olivia's frantic phone call wanting to know if we've talked? Michael wanted to know. I was trying to decide how to respond when my phone rang. Hi, Michael, I answered. I wasn't going to hide my words from Sophia, but I wasn't going to make it easy for her to hear the conversation. What's going on, James? It's about as bad as it gets, Michael. Are you sure you want to do this over the phone? After a short pause, Michael asked, Is she cheating on me? Yes. The silence lasted several minutes, broken only by occasional sobs. They'll see you at Jack's, he said. The call ended abruptly. I was going to text Michael and let him know I was available to talk anytime, but decided to leave him alone. I was confident he knew I had his back and was there for him. Sophia had quieted down while I was talking to Michael. After hanging up, I heard her say through the closed door, Please come to the kitchen. We need to talk. I considered going to our guest bedroom but decided to finish the bourbon on the table. After easing myself into a chair across from Sophia, I took a gulp and relished the slight burn in my throat. I glanced at my wife and saw the wheels spinning in her head as she prepared her next attack. My brain was dead. I didn't have much fight left. I was waiting for Sophia to start when my phone buzzed. Jesus, when will this day end? I exploded. I dug the phone out, looked at the screen, and saw a number I didn't recognize. Hello? I'm sorry to call so late. My name is Olivia Carter. Someone from this number called my house twice earlier this evening, upsetting my husband. I suspect the caller was trying to reach me. Olivia, my name is James Wilson. I called earlier to speak with you. Let me guess. You're calling to tell me my husband is cheating with your wife? Close. He's cheating with my sister-in-law, Olivia. I think they work together. After a long pause, she responded, This is the third time I've received a call like this, and it will be the last. How does a man do this to his wife and kids? The question was rhetorical, so I offered, I have pictures of them checking in together at the downtown Portland Marriott, kissing in the elevator, and returning to the lobby 3 hours later. Olivia was dressed differently after their date. The rest of the call was trading email addresses and a promise to send the pictures in the morning. After hanging up, Sophia said, Olivia told me they had an open marriage. That's a lie. His wife and kids believe they're in a monogamous marriage. Apparently, this is the third time she caught him cheating. She's going to divorce him. Sophia was stunned. I twirled the last of my bourbon in the glass before finishing it. After rinsing the glass, I headed to our bedroom. As I lay in bed and considered all that had happened, I concluded I wasn't to blame for all the sadness and destruction. As usual, my alarm went off at 5 a.m. Instead of starting the day exercising, I quickly showered, dressed, and headed to work. I wasn't trying to get away from Sophia. I needed to get into the office and complete the memo of understanding and get it off to Michael. Friday was busy. Michael and I needed to speak on the phone for 45 minutes to get the wording exactly right on a couple of points, but I was able to get the completed agreement to my boss by the noon deadline. I spent the afternoon catching up on emails from the previous day and headed home at 5 p.m., my usual quitting time. I had been wondering what the evening would bring and was only half surprised when I turned onto our street and saw Olivia's car and her parents' car parked in front of my house. It's going to be a long night. I groaned as I pressed the button to open the garage door. What the hell did you say to Michael? Was the opening salvo from Olivia as I closed the door behind me. Glaring at my frightened wife, I said, I'm going to change. They'll be back in a few minutes, but I warn you, if I am disrespected by your family in my house, they'll throw everyone out the front door, including you, Sophia. I didn't wait for a reply and hustled down the hall to our bedroom. After contemplating the coward's way out and climbing out the bedroom window, I decided to face Sophia and her family. It was difficult walking by my open bottle of bourbon, but I thought it prudent to have a clear head. My second thought was screw it, and I returned to the bar. 1 inch didn't seem to be enough, and 2 inches were over my limit for polite conversation, so I settled for 1.5 inches of my favorite amber liquid. All eyes were on me when I re-entered the kitchen. Everyone was seated around the table. There was an empty seat between Sophia and her father, Henry. Instead of sitting, I leaned against the kitchen counter, watched the group, and wet my lips with my drink. I liked my in-laws. They were good, solid people. Henry, my father-in-law, was a man I respected. He was straightforward and honest, and you always knew where you stood with him. If you remained on his good side, you couldn't have a better friend. If you crossed him, he could make your life miserable. Henry considered Michael and me as friends. My mother-in-law, Laura, thought of herself as a wheeler-dealer and businesswoman extraordinaire. She owned and operated a well-known local real estate franchise with an outstanding reputation. While Laura oversaw the day-to-day operation, everyone who mattered knew Henry was the brains behind its success. Wouldn't you be more comfortable sitting here? Sophia patted the chair next to her. I've been sitting all day. I'm good where I am, I replied. Olivia had her emotions more under control. What did you tell Michael? She asked. I thought for a second before responding. I texted him and asked to meet when he got home tomorrow. I told him it was urgent. When he called and wanted to know what was wrong, I confirmed he wanted to talk over the phone. I told him you were cheating on him. He cried for a few minutes before he could confirm he'd meet me. I was somewhat surprised at how devastated the family seemed to be. Sophia was crying and said, I begged you to mind your own business. I wondered if her statement was for her family's benefit. And I told you it was my business, I answered. My mother-in-law jumped in, that's debatable. Before I could comment, Olivia asked, Are you going to meet Michael tomorrow? I am. What are you going to tell him? She wanted to know. I don't have much more to tell him. I've sent him the pictures I took and told him you were with Ethan for just under 3 hours. I've sent him Ethan's name and address, along with his wife's contact information. He'll be a support and a shoulder to cry on. What about me, James? Olivia wanted to know. Don't I deserve support too? I actually cracked a smile as I looked around the table. It looks to me like you have plenty of support, Olivia. He'll stick with Michael on this one. How do you know that Michael doesn't cheat on Olivia while he's traveling? It's common for married men to stray when they're away from home, commented Laura. Although I couldn't imagine Michael cheating, if I was honest, I would have to admit I didn't have a clue how he behaved when he was away. Until yesterday, I never gave a thought that Olivia was a cheater or that my wife might be cheating on me. The table exploded with, How dare you? And that's uncalled for. Sophia was visibly shocked at my statement. So I jumped in and continued. At least I was upfront and told Sophia that last night her cavalier and dismissive attitude toward Olivia's cheating has me concerned. Henry, the girl's dad, told me Sophia has never cheated on you. I can't believe you would think so poorly of her. I knew I had to be careful with my next words. I didn't want to turn Henry against me. I purposely lowered the volume and harshness of my voice, looked Henry in the eye, and challenged, Prove it. After a few moments of silence, I continued, That's the thing, Henry. You can't prove that Sophia hasn't cheated on me. I held up my hand when the protest started. All I have is 6 years of absolute trust in Sophia. I told her last night that my trust in her is shaken. That's not fair, James, Sophia interrupted. I asked you 3 times last night if you knew Olivia cheated on Michael, and you refused to answer. Instead, you changed the subject. You didn't lie, but you were dishonest. Sophia looked at me as she admitted, I've known about Olivia's affairs. I haven't supported her, but I didn't want to cause a mess like this. She waved her hands, indicating our current problems. I hoped her affairs would run their course and Michael wouldn't find out. I nodded. Although I was greatly disappointed that Sophia hid her sister's infidelity, I could understand protecting her sister. Do you remember the talk we had about being exclusive a few weeks before you proposed to me? Sophia asked. When I nodded, she looked directly into my eyes and said, I promise I haven't had a romantic or intimate relationship since our talk. In fact, I haven't been with another man since we started dating after college. Call me naive, but I could see the angel I married 6 years earlier as she spoke those words. I love you, and I believe you, I told my bride. Her family was kind enough to let a few moments pass before we continued our conversation. I could tell that Henry was particularly happy with the turn of events. What are you going to do about Michael? Betty asked. I'm simply going to support my best friend, just like each of you will support Olivia. Michael deserves my support, and I'm going to give it to him. The following 6 weeks were a grind. Michael moved out of his house and into a nearby apartment. He immediately filed papers for an official separation from Olivia but held off filing for divorce. I had dinner with Michael every Tuesday while Sophia kept the same schedule with her sister. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was having lunch with a couple of work buddies at Jim's Grill and Bar. We were sitting at a table for 4 when a man pulled out the empty chair and sat down across from me. Hey jerk, I bet you forgot about me. It took a couple of beats before I was able to put a name to the face. Hi, Ethan. I heard Olivia dumped you. How does it feel to be an absentee dad? He sneered and said, Screw you. It's your fault. I looked at my friends Ben and James and saw that they were mildly amused. Turning my attention back to Ethan, I answered, yeah, your divorce is my fault. Ethan laughed and admitted, I guess it was partly my fault too. But there's so many married women around, it's impossible for me to stay faithful. I started to feel uneasy about Ethan's response when he continued, it seems I'm a sex addict, and my kink is married women. I like hooking them on my meat and sharing them with my friends. Ethan nudged Ben. That's what I did with Olivia. When her husband left town, I turned her into my personal sex doll and shared her with my friends. She loved every second of it. I was about ready to explode when Ethan pulled an envelope from his back pocket and tossed it onto the table next to my plate. It was the type of envelope that held pictures. Ethan's smirk told me everything I needed to know about the contents. I'll admit that my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, but I would be damned if I would let the jerk see me falter. I picked up the envelope and stuffed it into my jacket pocket. Trying to provoke me, Ethan asked, aren't you going to show your friends? I bet they'd love to see pictures and video of your wife and her sister screwing my boys. I've been turning her out for over 5 months. As wild and horny as Olivia is, your wife is 10 times wilder. I have a video of her on her knees, pleading for us to bang her. She loves being used like a sex doll. He laughed again. What's the matter, jerk? Don't you have anything to say? I was gritting my teeth but needed to respond. You've got to be the stupidest scumbag on the face of the earth. His smirk was still ertoir when I told him, when I give Michael those pictures, he's going to file for divorce. Since you're Olivia's direct supervisor, how long do you think it will take for him to sue you and your company? You'll be out of work in a week. It was hard, but I started laughing. The idiot knew he had underestimated me and was considering his next move. Did you know I grew up in this town? What do I care about where you grew up? He sneered. You should care. I know all the movers and shakers in town, I continued. I also know the meanest pieces of crap around. I would suggest you leave town while your legs still work. Screw you. I'm not scared of you, Ethan snapped back. I've got witnesses that you threatened me, he indicated Ben and James. They both laughed, and James said he really is an idiot. You're getting divorced, losing your kids, getting fired, and paying alimony and child support. Best of all, I would advise you to look over your shoulder. Someday soon, you're going to end up in a world of hurt. Ethan smugly pushed his chair back, stood, and said, Screw you, jerk. You're nothing but a cuck with a scum-sucker for a wife. My mind was whirling out of control as Ethan walked away. Later, back in my office, I looked at the pictures and confirmed the most grotesque details imaginable for a happily married man. There were explicit photos of Sophia with several different men, and in a couple of pictures, she was surrounded by multiple men and a woman. A second set of pictures showed Olivia doing many of the same acts. The video was even worse and crushed my soul. Sophia and Olivia loved being the center of a series of grotesque orgies. Cries of "screw me harder" were words I'll never forget. After gathering my thoughts and pushing the overwhelming sadness and anger aside, I called Michael and asked him to meet me for dinner. After 15 more minutes of staring off into space, I invited a second person to join Michael and me. I had tears in my eyes as I sat at my desk and continued to outline my plans. I knew it would be impossible for me to act normal around Sophia. I had to get away. I traveled almost once a month for my company. Half of my trips were planned in advance, and the other trips were urgent and last minute. I texted Sophia, the Whitaker account is in trouble. I'm on my way to the airport. Michael and I had a very quiet dinner that night. After ordering beers, I handed him the small stack of pictures that Ethan had given me earlier in the day. Michael was equally devastated for himself as he was for me. We agreed that divorce was the only option that worked for us, and we discussed the possibility of suing the insurance agency that employed Olivia and Ethan. In the end, we decided to follow the advice of our divorce attorney. We had been sitting at our table for well over an hour when I saw Robert enter the bar. He scanned the room, spotted me, and headed in our direction. He stopped to shake hands and exchange a few words with people at different tables. Robert is a generation older than Michael and me. His daughter, Amelia, went through our school system 1 year behind me. Robert owned a large auto salvage yard just outside of town. 15 years earlier, when I was 16 years old, I was practicing my serve at the high school tennis courts one summer afternoon. Amelia gave me a wave as she rode her bike past the courts. A few minutes later, as I was gathering up the balls scattered around the court, I looked up and saw 5 classmates forcefully pushing Amelia under the baseball field bleachers about 100 yards away. I had a pretty good idea what the Aholies were thinking, and I knew Amelia wasn't that kind of girl. I ran from the courts and was under the bleachers a few seconds later. Amelia's t-shirt had been pulled off. She was screaming, crying, and trying to cover herself as the guys were tugging at her shorts. Caleb Johnson turned just in time for the rim of my racket to connect with his nose. It exploded, blood splashing in every direction, and Caleb let out a blood-curdling scream as he dropped to the ground. My backhand solidly connected with Aaron Walker's cheek, and he was down for the count. I don't remember much after that. The 3 remaining Aholies tackled me and stomped the living daylights out of me while I was down. After they got the last few kicks in, they got scared and ran off. Amelia continued to cry as I tried to get my bearings. We left her bike at the field, and she helped me to my car. I was barely able to drive but eventually pulled up to the front of her house. My car hadn't fully stopped before Amelia jumped from the front seat and ran crying into her home. I had to get out of the car and circle it to close the door Amelia left open. As I closed the door, I heard a crash and turned toward the house. A huge man was running toward me, his face looking ready to kill. It wasn't until he was close that he noticed the damage to my face and my hunched-over posture. "You're Wilson's kid," he growled at me. I was barely able to nod. "I think I need an ambulance, Mr. Milano," I said, slumping against the car and lowering myself to the ground. Mr. Milano turned and yelled toward the house, "Call an ambulance. Do it now." Mr. Milano kneeled next to me, took my chin in his hand, and turned my head until we locked eyes. "What the hell happened to my daughter?" he demanded. "Some Aholies pulled her under the baseball field bleachers." "Was it you?" he barked. I groaned as I shook my head. I was practicing at the tennis court next to the field. Each word was painful. There was fire in his eyes as he asked, "What did those Aholies do to her?" When I got there, they pulled her shirt off. They were trying to get her pants off. She was still wearing her bra and shorts. If I wasn't in such pain, I'm sure his icy stare would have scared the life out of me. "I want their names. Caleb Johnson and Aaron Walker will be at the hospital when I get there." I busted their faces with my racket. I told him the other 3 names as an ambulance and police car pulled up behind my car. Mr. Milano leaned in until we were nose-to-nose. I could smell the garlic on his breath. In a voice just above a whisper, he said, "If you ever need a favor, come and see Robert Milano." When Robert got to our table, he sat without introductions. I handed him the envelope of pictures and waited a moment until he skimmed through them. When he looked up at me, I said, "There's a man named Ethan Carter. He's a top guy at Evergreen Insurance. His hobby is trapping married women for his own pleasure and later sharing them with his friends. The pictures I showed you are of him and his gang with my wife and my brother-in-law's wife." Robert nodded his understanding while I continued, "I'm hoping that someday soon, he won't be as handsome. His walk will be much less athletic, and he'll have trouble getting an erection." The 3 of us sat quietly for a number of minutes before Robert uttered his only words. "As you'll both be single soon, it might be smart if you join a gym. You might decide to go from work directly to the gym every single night. You can work out together for a few hours and then go out and have a nice dinner afterward." He looked carefully at our confused faces before finishing. "Do you idiots think you can have airtight alibis each night?" When he finally knew that we understood what he was saying, he rolled his eyes, nodded to me, got up, and slowly walked out of the bar. I didn't go home as I had told Sophia I would be out of town. Instead, I checked into a nearby Renaissance hotel for the night. I was able to talk directly to my boss and gave him an abbreviated version of my troubles. He agreed to let me work remotely and email my team, telling them I was traveling into the following week. The uncomfortable recliner in the corner of the hotel room called me. I slumped into the chair, closed my eyes, and thought through the previous number of weeks. It was obvious to me that because of the hard line I took with her sister, Sophia could not divulge her affair with Ethan and his friends. She knew with absolute certainty that I would divorce her. Sophia was right, but as I thought through the divorce equation, I hope I would have been fair if she had been honest and forthright. Instead, Sophia continued to lie to me. I had to find out about her treachery in a public setting surrounded by my friends and work associates. I can't imagine a scenario that would be more disrespectful and humiliating than sitting in front of your wife's pimp and discovering she is into orgies. She had been unfair to me in the extreme, and as a result, our divorce wouldn't be fair. Instead, I knew I had to crush Sophia. I vowed to myself that I would destroy my wife, my love, and my best friend in an equally extreme way. An amiable divorce was not in the cards for Sophia. I struggled out of the recliner, walked to the office desk in the corner of the hotel room, and made plans. It took until nearly 1:30 a.m. to sketch out my pre-divorce strategy for my lying, cheating wife. If my plan went poorly, her heart would be crushed. On the other hand, if things lined up as I thought they might, she would be left shattered and in a heap at the curb. The next morning, I was able to get an appointment with a divorce attorney for the following day. Despite the attorney's recommendation, I didn't begin to divide our finances. That would have to wait. I moved to an extended stay hotel and set up a remote office. I ignored phone calls and texts from Sophia until Friday. At that point, I simply messaged her that I would be away for the weekend. Her response was beyond upset, and she called all weekend, begging me to call her back. Over the weekend, I was able to purchase everything I needed for my plan. After my checklist was complete, I headed to the mountains for a long hike on Sunday. When I returned to the hotel, I turned on my phone and had texts and calls from Sophia, each of her family members, and a few work associates. Apparently, Sophia was extremely upset that I was off the grid and was trying to track me down. On Monday and Tuesday, I worked from my hotel room. I tried to tie up all loose ends as I would be out of the office the following day. Tuesday was day. I checked out of the hotel after breakfast and headed home. On the way, I drove through the parking lot of Sophia's employer to make sure her car was at work. I also put a GPS device under her seat. It took a couple of hours to set up the needed equipment and props at home, and I was done by the early afternoon. At 2 p.m., I started a fire in our living room fireplace. Sophia and I often enjoyed a nice fire on a weekend winter night. We'd sip wine, talk, and snuggle as we watched the flames jump around the fireplace. But today wasn't a chilly February day, it was October, and the outdoor temperature was 76 degrees in the early afternoon. I waited until 3 p.m. and texted Sophia. Just arrived home. My phone rang immediately. I let Sophia's call go to voicemail, but she didn't leave a message. Instead, she texted me a holy. I watched the GPS indicator on my laptop. I had expected Sophia to leave work immediately, but she didn't. She was going to show me. The fire was blazing, and I continued to add logs to the pile. At 5 p.m., when the GPS indicated that Sophia had started her drive home, the temperature in the living room was stifling and easily over 100 degrees. Perfect, I thought. My heart hardened. I gritted my teeth and waited for her to get home. There was a 3-minute delay between the time that Sophia opened the garage door and when she entered the kitchen. I heard her drop her briefcase by the door and felt her presence as she stood in the entryway to the living room. She walked in and found me sitting on the couch and watching the fire. There was a cheese and cracker plate and a bottle of wine on the table in front of the couch. I was holding one glass of wine, a second glass was at the other end of the table for Sophia. "What the hell are you doing?" "The heat is overbearing," Sophia said. As I turned from the fire to look at Sophia, I asked, "What does it look like I'm doing?" "I've prepared a romantic welcome for my wife." I noticed that 2 beads of sweat were already running down her forehead and cheek. "A romantic?" The words caught in her throat, and she didn't finish the sentence. Instead, she took a few steps closer to the fire, bent down, and picked up a half-burned item off the stone. She held it up and studied it closely before taking a step back and looking toward the top shelf of the bookcase. I thought she might hurt her back. She whirled so quickly to face me. Her eyes were wide in horror as she showed me the smoldering front cover of a book. It was the only part of the book that escaped the flames. It didn't look like Sophia was in any shape to form words, so I calmly told her we didn't have any kindling to start the fire, so I used a couple of those old books. I nodded to the empty space on the top shelf where Sophia kept a full row of books. I only used 4 or 5. We have plenty more to start our next fire. While talking, I had gotten up from the couch, grabbed Sophia's glass of wine, and was holding it out to her. I watched as her face morphed from incomprehension to rage. On the day that Sophia was born, her dad gave her a present. The present was the most popular children's book of the previous year. On the first empty page, her dad wrote Sophia a love letter that was heartwarming and described his hopes and dreams for his daughter. Her dad gave her the same birthday present each year. She had 29 books, each a reminder of her father's love. I clenched my jaw as I saw Sophia scream and start to swing. I'm not sure if she intended to slap or punch me. When her hand hit my face, It hurt like hell. Her hand smashed into my left eye, and her fingernails broke the skin on my cheek. The contents of the 2 glasses of wine covered the front of my shirt and pants. Her face changed again, and as she started to cry, I could again see utter confusion. Without saying a word, she turned and ran up the stairs to our second-floor bedroom. I heard the door slam behind her. Although I was devastated because I knew my marriage was over, I did smile. My plan had worked to perfection. When I looked in the bathroom mirror, I saw that my eye was red and starting to swell. Sophia's nails had broken the skin, and a tiny bit of blood trickled down my cheek. "Let's get this over with," I said to myself as I pulled my cell phone from my pocket and dialed the number. 911, what's your emergency? I heard from the other end. My name's James Wilson, and I need police help with a domestic situation. My wife has physically attacked me. After giving the dispatcher my address, she asked, "Are you in a safe place, Mr. Wilson?" "I am. My wife has locked herself in our bedroom. He'll be sitting on the front porch until the police arrive." "Do you need medical attention?" the dispatcher asked. "No, I wasn't hurt that badly." For police procedure, the dispatcher stayed on the line until the first police car arrived. I know my call was recorded, and I was very careful how I answered her questions. Almost immediately after the first patrol car pulled to the curb, a second arrived. 3 police officers crossed the grass together. "Thanks for coming, officers. What's going on?" the crusty old veteran asked. I turned my head so they could easily see the damage to my left side. "My wife, Sophia, hit me." "Why did she strike you?" He wanted to know. I wanted to be careful with my answer. "My wife has become verbally abusive over the last several months. I suspect that she is conflicted. She has been hiding an affair that she doesn't think I know about. In fact, I had planned to have her served with divorce papers tonight. When we talk to your wife, are we going to find any damage?" "I've never touched my wife or any other woman in anger," was my honest answer. One of the younger officers asked, "Are there any guns in your home?" "I have several handguns. They're all in a gun safe in my office. My wife does not have the combination to the safe." As the 2 younger officers entered my house to talk with Sophia, I said to the third, "Would you like to see a video of my wife hitting me?" He squinted as he tried to make sense of my statement. Took a few beats for him to ask, "You have proof of the assault?" "I haven't looked at it, but I think I have proof." As I finished, I waved for him to follow me. My laptop was on the kitchen counter. I needed to wake the computer and find the cloud-based storage account. I opened the folder, backed the video up 30 minutes, and found the start of our confrontation. I pressed play and stepped away so the police officer could clearly see the action. He watched until Sophia left the room and ran upstairs, then asked to watch it again. After the second time through, he keyed the communication device on his shoulder and said, "Arrest Mrs. Wilson." Almost immediately, I heard Sophia screaming from upstairs, and my heart started pounding. I knew the officer had asked me a question, but I needed him to repeat himself. "Are all the rooms in your home under video surveillance?" This was a line of questioning that I didn't want to get into but knew I had to answer honestly. "No, the living room is the only room with a camera." He nodded in understanding while scratching his chin in thought. "How long have you had the camera in the living room?" I shrugged my shoulders and admitted, "It's a fairly recent addition." Our staring contest was broken when Sophia screamed and begged, "James, what the hell is going on? Please, please help me." I was about to respond when one of the young officers shouted, "Sir, this is a police investigation. Please leave immediately." He was talking to an older man standing in the open front door of my home. With just as much authority, the man said, "I am an official process server, and I am here to serve Mrs. Sophia Wilson." He marched up to Sophia as all 3 officers took a step closer in case things got out of hand. The man asked, "Are you Sophia Wilson?" When Sophia nodded, he held up an envelope and said, "Sophia Wilson, you are served. In addition to the divorce petition, there is a restraining order keeping you away from Mr. James Wilson, his home, and his work." Because Sophia was handcuffed, he handed the envelope to the officer holding her elbow. As the process server left, I turned to Sophia. I watched as the panic and confusion drained from her face. It was replaced by calm. She looked at me and asked, "How did you find out?" "Ethan told me." As the 2 younger officers escorted Sophia to the back seat of the patrol car, the third officer gave me his business card and asked that I email a copy of the video. I walked him to the front door and watched the first car pull away with Sophia. The older officer had stopped halfway down my front walk. He turned and asked, "I've seen you on occasion at Bill's barbecue, haven't I?" "Yes, I recognize you, Sergeant." He told me, 4 years ago I divorced my wife for cheating. In paying alimony, child support, health insurance, and the mortgage on the house she lives in with my kids and her jerk boyfriend. Maybe the next time I see you at Bill's barbecue you'll let me buy you a beer, and you can tell me what the hell happened here today. I went to work the next day and was somewhat productive. As I survived Friday and Friday, I groaned out loud when I arrived home on Friday night and found my father-in-law, Henry, sitting on my front step. After pulling into the garage, I got out of the car and yelled, "Come in this way, Henry." As he entered, I poured 2 extra-large Knob Creeks. We sat at the kitchen table, slowly sipping our drinks for many minutes before he said, "She was cheating too?" I simply nodded. "Is there any hope?" He wanted to know. I took 2 more slow sips before I could calm down enough to be kind and respectful to Henry. It wasn't just one time and it wasn't with just one man. I took another taste and then told Henry the complete truth, and it wasn't with just one man at a time. He looked at me with disbelief, and before he could respond, I told him, "I've seen pictures and videos that make me want to throw up." Henry shrunk in his seat and turned white. A tear ran over his cheek. We sat together for a long time, each of us caught up in our own thoughts and memories. Sophia and Olivia didn't learn this behavior from their mother or me. His intense stare was just short of chilling. Everyone knows that. Several more minutes passed before Henry rose to his feet and circled the table. As I stood, he grabbed me in a tight bear hug and sobbed into my shoulder. After letting go, he shuffled to the door with the same gait as a 90-year-old man. After opening the door, he looked over his shoulder and said, "Burning those books was a shitty thing to do." I had completely forgotten about the stunt I used to start the altercation with Sophia. I nearly shouted, "Hold on." I exited the kitchen and was back within seconds with a small box. I handed it to Henry. After opening it, he looked at me with a stunned expression. I told him, "I know you treasure those books, and I never would have destroyed them." "Then how?" He was too shocked to finish his thought. I went out to the bookstore and got copies. As is my normal morning habit, I sat at the kitchen table that Saturday morning and scanned our local newspaper on my tablet. I smiled when I read the Portland Times local section. West Portland police are investigating the savage assault on a local man as he left a neighborhood bar in the Rosewood section of the city. Michael Carter was attacked in the rear parking lot of the Crown at approximately 10:45. His injuries are extensive and required hospitalization. A spokesman for the WPPD said that the police have several leads and expect a quick arrest. It was a bright and sunny December morning. I watched the red Ford SUV park a few spots from me, and the driver slowly pulled himself out of the vehicle. "Hi, Ethan. You look like crap." I was in the parking lot in front of Riverside Rehabilitation and was sitting on the open tailgate of my Ford F-150 pickup. A little bird had told me that Ethan had a 10:45 appointment. It might be a good idea if you get a handicap tag so you can park in a space closer to the building. You know, like the other cripples. In addition to the damage to his knees and feet, Ethan also had a shattered jaw that would be wired shut for at least another month. "Cat got your tongue, jerk?" I asked with a smirk. I have to give Ethan credit. He hobbled toward me using a cane and stopped 10 feet away. He knew that Michael and I had been questioned by the police and later cleared, but I suspect in his gut he knew we were involved in his beating. Now he knew for sure. The hate in his eyes was palpable. I'm sure he was imagining grotesque tortures that would take months to complete. I was confident that Ethan and I would meet sometime in the future. I didn't want to be looking over my shoulder for the rest of my life, so I arranged this meeting. Ethan slowly turned and took his first shuffle when I said, "Marie Carter from Salem, Oregon. Susan Berg from Portland, Washington. Lori Fitzpatrick from Tacoma, Washington." The hate in his eyes turned to confusion. "If anything happens to me, Fim, in a plane crash, if I drown on vacation, if I fall down a flight of stairs, I've made arrangements for my friends to visit your mother and sisters. My friends will beat their faces just like they beat yours. They will damage their legs just like your legs have been damaged. And Ethan, I wanted to make sure he was listening carefully. My friends will kick their crotches just like they kicked yours." I waited a few moments while he digested the information before finishing. "While your mother and sisters are withering in pain, my friends will tell them their beating is your fault." I was surprised Ethan stared me down for several long moments before giving me a quick nod. I wasn't sure whether he was nodding his understanding or calling a truce. He turned and stumbled along toward the entrance of the building. I'm glad to report it was my last contact with Ethan Carter. I did give my divorce lawyer the power of attorney needed to handle all legal issues related to our split. We didn't have kids, we earned roughly the same amount of money, and most importantly, I didn't care about anything other than separating myself from Sophia. I received a call from my lawyer a few weeks after I had Sophia served. She told me we've reached an agreement almost exactly along the terms we discussed. However, Sophia won't sign off until she's had the opportunity to talk with you. I mumbled a profanity and was advised, just do it. Sit down and let her talk. Get it over with. Hey Race, what I'll agree to have Sophia sign the papers and you approve everything so it's official. I'll meet with her for 1 hour in a conference room at your office after she signed the papers. I heard that should work before the call ended. 3 days later, I was sitting in the conference room. August, the paralegal, knocked on the door, opened it, and told me everything had been signed off and notarized. She nodded and backed away from the door, leaving Sophia standing in the entrance. She had obviously put some effort into her dress and makeup, but that didn't matter. Sophia was a knockout, at least to me, even dressed in a sweatshirt and ponytail. She circled the table, bent down, and kissed my cheek before taking a seat across from me. Are you as nervous as I am? She wanted to know. My initial thought was, what a weird way to start, but I gave her question some consideration. I shrugged and admitted, I'm not nervous. I'm more anxious. I want to get this over with and be able to get on with my life. Tears started running down her cheek when she told me I was blackmailed. Ethan was going to put videos of Olivia on the internet. Her dad had called me early in the divorce proceedings and told me the same thing, so I wasn't surprised. It might have started with blackmail, but I watched the videos. I've seen you orgasm thousands of times. And they were real. You begged for more sex. You begged to be screwed harder. You were begging every second there wasn't something shoved down your throat. I was getting madder by the second and needed to calm down. After a few moments, I continued, you may have felt coerced, but that isn't any reason to screw up our marriage. Just because you found out Olivia was cheating on her husband does not mean you needed to turn yourself into one as well. Sophia exploded. I was so confused and didn't see any alternative. What could I have done? You could have and should have trusted me. I was angry when Sophia rolled her eyes. Together with Olivia, we would have gone to the police and filed a report. We'll never know if the police could have developed the evidence to do anything. We do know that his wife and employer would have found out, and we would have had a tiny bit of satisfaction. Even more important, we'd still be together. Unfortunately, you didn't trust me. Truthfully, I don't know if you ever did. What kind of crap are you talking about? Sophia wanted to know. I answered with a question. Do you remember why we broke up the first time? The first time? Do you mean in high school? Sophia looked utterly confused. What does that have to do with anything? In high school, you didn't trust me enough to tell me you wanted to help your neighbor Daniel and go to his prom with him. You've got to be kidding me. I was a dumb high school kid, and I was worried about hurting the feelings of my first serious boyfriend. Were you a dumb college kid too? I asked. When she gave me a questioning look, I continued. On Labor Day weekend before you started college, we made love on a raft on Simpson Lake and promised that we would remain faithful and get married after college. Your promise lasted 10 days. Sophia angrily asked, are you telling me that you were completely faithful the first year you were in college? I shook my head and ignored her pointless question. My point is, whether you agree or not, I question if you ever trusted me. I don't think either of us would argue that I have every reason not to trust a word that comes out of your mouth at this point. You straight up lie. When you're not lying, you're playing word games and hiding the truth. Trying to change the direction of the conversation. Sophia told me, I haven't seen Ethan since all the trouble started. When I smirked, Sophia asked, what? Ethan had an unfortunate accident. He's not able to perform at his previous peak level. What are you talking about? Sophia asked. With an Ertoweir grin, I answered, among many injuries, both of his testicles ruptured. One was surgically removed. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she asked, how could you possibly know? I know because that's what I paid to have happen. Her hands covered her face as she stared wide-eyed across the table at me. He's a vicious man, James. I'm scared for you. I met Ethan a few weeks after his accident, and we had a very civilized chat. I'm almost positive that I convinced him our association needs to end. Sophia's expression changed from fright to love. I would seen that look countless times over the years. You still love me? she nearly shouted. I was so surprised at her outburst that I laughed. Sophia was obviously frustrated and said, "You can't tell me that you don't love me." I shrugged and told her, "You're right. I can't say that I don't love you. I also can't say that I do love you. What you need to understand is I am unwilling to put the time and effort into growing any love that's left in me." Sophia nearly exploded. "Why would you ever say that?" "It's simple." I looked directly into her eyes and told her, "You aren't worth it." Sophia sat back and noticeably shrunk into her chair. Tears continued to stream down her cheeks, and I could see that she was breathing through her open mouth. I reached into the folder that had been sitting on the table in front of me and took out 3 pictures. One by one, I placed the pictures in front of her. The first picture clearly showed Sophia naked with her legs spread wide. The second picture had Sophia on her hands and knees. In the third picture, Sophia was on her knees and smiling. The bottom line for me is my future children, and I deserve someone better than that vile woman as their mother and my wife. Goodbye, Sophia. I got up and walked away. A few days later, Sophia was sentenced to 50 hours of community service for the domestic violence case. It took another 7 months for me to get the divorce settled. I sold the house and gave Sophia her share of the proceeds. I moved to a different town while still keeping my job. I did not plan to date as of now and have kept myself focused on work. Michael also filed for divorce and is still living in the same town. I occasionally get calls from Henry asking how things are going. I enjoy his calls. Michael and I meet at times when he's in town for business trips. Life has not been kind, but it is still better off this way. Thanks for watching. What do you think about the choices made in this story? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.